Hello again, Paul.
Hello. Welcome, Noah, to Raw and Cooked Vegan.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you. Great to have you. So, I think you saw a couple of videos. So, usually the way I'll start this, Noah, is simply ask you, what was your childhood like? Did your parents have nutritional awareness to any degree? Was it basically standard American diet? And perhaps you could throw your experience with fitness in there as well. What was your childhood like?
Well, my parents, they weren't nutritionists, they weren't vegans. They gave me the standard advice, like, don't eat so much white bread and eat your vegetables. Don't leave the table till you finish your carrot juice, that sort of thing. But we were definitely meat eaters. We ate dairy, we ate eggs. And I was always, especially as a teenager, a big eater. I would eat like 10 or 12 scrambled eggs at a time with avocado and salsa and tortillas.
Wow.
Yeah. And I would cook up, hamburgers and steaks as well. And I got into fitness probably junior, senior year of high school.
Okay.
Working out and running, not as part of a team, not cross country, just because I loved it. And It wasn't until college that I started thinking about vegetarianism and veganism. I dated a girl who was a vegetarian, and after we broke up, actually, I started to get curious about it.
Okay.
I started looking this up because I'd always been interested in what was the healthiest way to eat, what way to eat would promote my physicality in the best way and keep me healthy, keep me free from disease.
Yeah.
So I started researching more about vegetarianism, and the arguments all made sense to me that our bodies were better designed to digest plant foods and that it was a more efficient fuel for us and better for us in the long run. So I just decided to try it out. I was vegetarian for about a week, and then I felt like I was half-assing it, so I went vegan. I like to do things 100%.
You were much faster than I was in that transition.
Yeah. So it was probably about 2 months in after I'd been vegan for 2 months, and I felt great. I didn't see any reason to stop. And I'd been researching more about it, and the more I learned, the more I thought it was the right path for me. Because I learned it wasn't just better for me, my body, it was better for animals, of course, because they weren't being killed to feed me. They weren't being factory farmed and living lives of horrible suffering, for me anyway. And also better for the environment, because the animal industry is a very inefficient way to provide calories to humans.
Amen.
And
Amen.
it's a great pollutant in our environment. Biggest contributor to water pollution and air pollution in this country. And also it takes up an enormous amount of land to grow grains, of course, for the animals that we feed the grains to. And then we harvest the meat from them. So it was about 2 months after I started that I had some steak fajitas to see if I would miss having meat at all. And I had the steak fajitas. Yeah. I had the steak fajitas, and it was good. It tasted good. But I realized that all the flavors I liked were the spices and the vegetables and the rice, and that I would enjoy it just as much without the meat. And from there, I never went back.
All right,
it's been
man.
about 5 years now.
5 years. So were you still in college when you made that transition?
Yeah, I was a sophomore, about 20 years old.
Okay. And since you're saying this, I think there's an interesting point here. I'll see, on different sites and people are blogging about different stuff, and there's a lot of paleo promoters out there, and perhaps even people that tried a vegetarian approach and decided it didn't work for them, and then they went back to some version of paleo or a SAD diet. But I get from you that categorically, from your experience and everything you've read, all the evidence points to some type of vegan diet being superior. Is that accurate?
For me, it definitely has been. I mean, I've talked with former vegetarians who said that they had to quit because they weren't feeling good on the diet anymore. Yep. And I don't know exactly what they were eating, but obviously it wasn't working for them.
Yep.
What I'm eating is definitely working for me because I feel great. I get sick a lot less often than I used to when I ate animal products, which is a great side effect. Yeah. I feel like I can run farther and lift more weights. I gained weight after I went vegan, and it was muscle mass, which was nice because I'm a naturally pretty skinny guy.
Very interesting, yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely been good for me. Certain family members, like my aunt and uncle, are still waiting for me to keel over from malnutrition and die. But,
all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, well, this is cool. So 5 years vegan, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about, I imagine in that time, you've tried different variations of veganism. So was it initially a conscious vegan that you were, or were you kind of eating, substitute meats and that sort of thing, or were you eating substitute cheeses, or did you go pretty much into the natural food thing from the get-go? What's been your experience in that respect? Also, high fat. What's your take on fat?
Well, when I switched over, I was already what I would consider a pretty healthy eater. I ate whole foods, lots of vegetables. So it was a pretty easy transition for me in that regard because I already had experience cooking. I like cooking my own meals, so it was kind of fun to learn new recipes and learn new ways of cooking. And I tried fake meats like tofu and seitan and all that, but none of them really did it for me. And I realized that I didn't actually miss the taste or the texture of meat, so
beautiful.
They weren't necessary for me. And plus, if I ate a lot of tofu or something, I had some indigestion. I didn't make me feel too good. What made me feel best was whole natural foods, fruits, vegetables. And at the time, I think I was baking bread and stuff, eating a lot of grains as well, whole grains. Okay. Now I don't eat so many grains anymore. High fat, well, I never was much for the sweets, like the vegan treats and sweets. And avocados have always been a love affair of mine. Avocados are something I've always indulged in, and coconut. I used to eat a lot of curries, so I have a lot of coconut fat. I don't eat so many curries anymore, but
okay.
I certainly didn't try to stay away from fat.
Okay, and you didn't find any significant changes when you reduced the fat intake?
Well, I mean, the most significant difference that I would feel when making dietary changes within veganism was when going high carb raw, meaning lots of fruits and usually ending the day with a salad. And when I eat that way, I definitely feel lighter and more energetic. And when I eat a big cooked meal that might be more heavy, I tend to indulge and eat a lot of it. As I said, I'm a pretty big eater. I can be. And when I do that, I sometimes slip into sort of the food coma where I don't feel like doing much. But on raw, I never actually make it to that point. So I'm always high energy, which is nice.
Okay. And on that note, do you find if it's an all raw meal that it's as satisfying as say one of those big high calorie starch meals?
It's a totally different way of relating to food for me because it is not satisfying in the same way.
Okay.
I think we activate sort of a binge mechanism when we have high fat, high salt, high sugar foods because evolutionarily speaking, humans grew up in environments where those foods were rare, and when we found them, we activated this binge mechanism so we'd eat as much as possible and store up for the hard months to come. Whereas with raw food, I don't think that mechanism is activated, so I don't binge in the same way, and I don't feel satiated and filled up in the same way. But if I eat plenty of fruit, and I feel high energy in a different way than after I eat a cooked meal.
All right.
But I can't say that I've totally transitioned to raw because cooked food is delicious, and I still indulge in that.
All right. Someone said something recently, and I think I've experienced something a little bit similar. This is I don't know if you know Barry's Vegan Life. Barry, he was talking about being raw throughout a northern winter, and that it was he felt like he was cold all the time. And I know from, you could say, a biochemistry level, a banana has a lot more nutrients than, say, a bowl of rice if you look at it comprehensively. So I know this argument that I think maybe Doug Graham would make, that it doesn't matter if you're in the North Pole or in Florida or wherever, but your ideal diet would be a raw food, which would mean a lot of fruit. But what Barry was saying is when he was eating a raw food diet, he never felt like he could get warm. So I'm wondering, have you had any experience like that, or is that not been an issue, not something you've heard of?
Well, I live in Oregon, in Portland area, and it gets, in the winter times, it gets into the 20s. Usually it's in the 30s or low 40s. And the only real difference that I could say is that when you eat a hot food meal, it fills you up with hot stuff, so you feel warmer, at least in that moment.
Right.
As far as...
I think there's something to that. There's something to that, just raising body temperature from the heat of the food, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a very comforting feeling in that, especially since a lot of us grew up with that, eating a warm bowl of stew or soup in the wintertime. And also there's some sentiment there, like reminds us of our childhood, our mom feeding us a bowl of soup or whatever. And this diet, for a lot of people, is a huge change, and it's a huge transition. It doesn't have those same memories, and people tend to like what's comfortable and what they're used to. But as far as getting cold goes, when I'm cold, I just tend to go out and exercise, and that's how I warm up.
Yeah. All right. That's cool.
And one of my habits is daily cold showers, so I feel like I'm conditioned to embrace the cold already.
All right. You sound like maybe you have a slight monastic inclination, man. Our freezing cold shower in the morning, and yeah, that's a good wake up exercise. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For that, I mean, a few years ago, I was hitchhiking around Oregon with a buddy of mine, and we were hiking part of the Pacific Crest Trail, and I was dirty and sweaty, and I was hiking around, and I found this waterfall, and it was frigid, it was freezing, but I decided to go for a wash anyway. And afterwards, I just felt more clean than I'd ever felt before, and so good, so, like warm, and like that warmth was emanating from within me, and just so full of energy that when I got back, I started taking cold showers and haven't quit.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. Okay, so there's so many topics we can cover, and you can interject anywhere along the way with anything you want to. I'm going to throw at you a couple of nutrients, and I'd like you to tell us the conclusions you've reached personally on each one. So,
all right.
Okay, so the first one is B12.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you think it's worthy of being concerned about? I know some organic gardeners feel that they're getting the bacteria they need from the soil. Some people take a sublingual, some people take a shot. What's your take on it?
Well, B12 should be a concern for everybody, no matter what your diet, because people of any diet are diagnosed with B12 deficiency. And it's kind of a strange thing, because you can go for years without intaking any B12, your body stores it, but then if you are still not taking any B12, you can develop some pretty severe symptoms. You start displaying mental disorder, and you start acting crazy. And people have been put into sanitariums because of B12 deficiency, and then they were later diagnosed, injected with B12, and a few hours later they're sane again. It's like a miracle cure. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
As far as getting B12, for the first 4 years I was vegan. I never took any vitamins, and I didn't worry about it at all, and I didn't see any negative effects. And then I decided, because I learned a little bit more about B12, I started taking a lingual vitamin every day.
Okay.
And I ran out a couple months ago and haven't reordered, but I think if I was smarter, I'd just go get a test and see what my levels were, and I recommend that everyone do that.
All right. All right.
And then you can act based on the results.
Is that sublingual you took, is that a methylcobalamin? The methyl variety, or the cyano, or does that matter to you?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
No, it was Veg 1 vitamins, I think.
Okay. Okay.
And that's all I know about that.
All right.
I saw a talk by Michael Greger, Dr. Michael Greger of nutritionfacts.org. I'm sure you know about him.
I do.
And he was talking about B12, and one theory that he had and that he'd read from other nutritionists and scientists is that before we sanitized our water, we would just get our B12 from our water sources, because we drank from streams and natural water sources. And so we wouldn't have needed to eat animal products to do that. It would just be in our water. Whereas today, getting it from the tap after it's been sanitized, there's no B12.
I know, that's incredible that the B12 content of water was probably significant. Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, How about vitamin D?
Well, vitamin D, I think it was also included in my Veg 1 tablet, but as I said, 4 years prior to that, I never had any symptoms from vitamin D deficiency. But I like to go out into the sunshine as often as possible, and our bodies, of course, produce vitamin D from interaction with the sunlight.
Right. So that tablet you're talking about, was that a multivitamin?
Yeah, it was a multivitamin.
Okay.
See if I can find it for you. I can send you a link.
That's cool. That's cool. All right. And then the third nutrient I'm somewhat interested in is iodine. Do you eat sea vegetables? Do you have iodine in your salt? If you use salt, do you think that's a concern?
I am not a good person to ask about that because I'm pretty sure I probably get some iodized salt from time to time, but I haven't worried about it.
Okay, all right, cool. And I like your attitude with the raw cook thing. I feel like you're kind of heavily raw, but occasionally you might eat some cooked food, and you don't. It's not like you're rigid about it. I really like that. What are the conditions under which you might eat some cooked food? Is that just if you happen to be in a restaurant or you just feel like it?
Usually it's when I'm out with friends at a restaurant.
Yeah.
And I was trying to be strict about being raw for a while because I wanted to give it a good, fair shake, how it would feel on a totally raw diet. Yeah. I did it for about 30 days, and I felt good. I felt significantly better maybe, but not so much better that I wanted to make it my whole life, because there are some advantages to being out with friends and sharing a cooked meal that's delicious and has different flavors than you would find in raw food. So I decided not to beat myself up about it when I had a cooked meal and just enjoy life. Cause,
I love the practicality of that. I love it.
Yeah, because being 100% vegan is absolutely important to me, because it's not just for my body, it's for the world and it's for other creatures. But being 100% raw doesn't have the same powerful motivational force behind it for me.
Yeah. Okay. There's two huge issues in addition to health, which I think are powerful reasons to be vegan, and you've kind of already addressed them, but I wonder if you might share with us a little bit more on each one. So the first is ethics, the ethical treatment of animals, and I don't know how much of a role that played in your initial choice to go vegan, but what have you learned along the way that reinforced your notion that this was the ethically superior way? I mean, what are some of the unethical things that are associated with animal production for eating?
How long do we have? I could talk about that for 3 or 4 hours.
You could tell this is a softball, man.
Yeah, well, as far as how much that had to do with my initial decision to go vegan, it pretty much zero. That was a selfish decision to go vegan. I just wanted to see if it would make me more healthy and make me feel better athletically. But as time went on, the personal health reasons actually became subordinated by all the rest, because the animal industry is so horrific, and it's so bad for the animals, it's so bad for people, it's so bad for the world. I work for an organization called Mercy for Animals now. It's campaigns against factory farming, tries to promote a vegetarian lifestyle. And I just volunteer, I speak, occasionally I pass out propaganda, that sort of thing. But one of the things Mercy for Animals does is just hires people to get jobs at factory farms and wear hidden cameras and do these jobs and see what they find, see what other workers are doing and how they treat the animals, see the conditions in these places, and just randomly selecting farms, they find really horrific things. I mean, baby piglets, I'll start with that one because that's the first thing that came to mind. Their tails are cut off when they're just born as the babies without any painkillers, and their testicles are cut out without any painkillers, and any man knows that would be very painful. And wounds are often left untreated. Sows, mother pigs, are often kept in gestation crates throughout their whole lives, except for when they're actually giving birth. And these gestation crates are so small they can't even lie down or turn around. And they go insane because they have nothing to do. They're just standing in this tiny crate all day. And they resort to things like bar biting. They're just chewing on the bars and smacking their head into the bars because they've gone insane from the environment they're in.
Jesus, man. Yeah.
And, I mean, I could go on and on. One thing that people don't much realize is about how we fish. It's so enormously destructive. For every pound of edible fish that we catch, we kill 5 pounds of fish that are no use to us, because the way we fish, we just use absolutely massive nets to drag the ocean floor and scoop up whatever we can. And it's so destructive to the ocean environment. And if we were able to walk around on the ocean floor and see what was going on, I'm sure there would be more of a reaction to this. But because it's out of sight, it's out of mind.
It's a great point, Noah. It's a great point. You know, I saw this, I think it was McDougall was saying 90% of the ocean's life has been taken out. We've lost 90% of the either through fishing or I guess through chemical changes in the ocean water, temperature changes. But 90%, that's outrageous.
Yeah, I haven't seen that figure myself, but I would not be surprised if it was true.
Yeah.
And
all right. So this is an interesting thing, and I think what you just said there, that people don't see what's happening, and I think that principle applies to the slaughterhouses as well.
Oh yeah.
What's the line? If slaughterhouses had glass walls, there wouldn't be any more slaughterhouses.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's an interesting thing, and this is something I question myself about. I was vegetarian for like 25 years before I became vegan, and I didn't make the connection between dairy and the meat industry. So I felt, I'm doing the ethical thing. Milk is. You think of these cows and these bucolic scenes and being happily milked, but it's kind of naive to not realize what's behind that.
And the industry works very hard to make people think that the image of their farm they come up with, it's like McDonald's farm, cows are grazing out in the grass and chickens are out under the sunshine, that sort of thing. And they keep these ginormous sheds where most of the farming actually happens a pretty well-kept secret. They don't want people to see what happens because then more people would not buy those products. But for me, even if it was that idyllic farm and you were raising the animals and the farmers thought of the animals as friends, I still don't think that we should be murdering our friends to consume their flesh, even if their lives are not horrible and actually quite pleasant. I think that in the world we live in today, our agricultural resources are so great, so powerful, we could be feeding much more than the current world population if everyone was just eating what we were producing plant-wise. And there's no need, health-wise or well-being-wise, to eat from animals. And if there's no need to hurt other creatures to feed ourselves, then why would we do it?
I love this. It's a beautiful point, Noah. Beautiful point. What might you say? Oftentimes it seems to me that meat eaters. I don't know if it's because subconsciously they recognize they're doing something wrong. I don't know what the reason behind this is, but oftentimes, meat eaters who feel strongly that they have a right to eat meat assert that animals are somehow distinct from humans in a way that justifies the killing of animals. And I wonder, what is it about vegans that, to me it's kind of an expression of consciousness. At a certain level of consciousness, you feel that a living being has value, and that there's a difference between, say, a carrot and a rabbit. I don't know. I'm just kind of. What would you say about that? Why is it that some people seem to think it's acceptable to kill sentient beings, and that there's nothing ethically wrong with that?
Well, I think the vast majority of humans, except for those that are born without empathy, like psychopaths, are innately compassionate beings. We see an animal in pain or another person in pain, and we want to alleviate that pain. And people, even meat eaters, own dogs or own other pets, and they would do anything to protect those animals. And I think it's just, they're so used to the status quo, they were raised eating meat and thinking that that was a normal thing to do, that they just have this block in their minds. They don't recognize that pigs are actually smarter than dogs and just as fun to have as a pet and just as worthy of being treated with respect as a dog is, or, I'm not going to say as a person is, because I do believe that as humans we have to value other humans ahead of animals, but
right.
My uncle likes to poke fun at me and like I'm eating a carrot, like, don't you hear the carrot screaming? But it's a fallacious argument, because we can look into an animal's eyes and see emotion and see intelligence, and we see these creatures acting, and we know that action comes from a place of reason and intelligence. And whereas plants, they don't react in the same way to stimuli. They don't have needs of a central nervous system or a brain. They can't feel pain in the same way that other creatures can.
Yeah, I love that point. To me, it's very clear that there's a difference in consciousness between an animal and a plant. And it's an argument that meat eaters make, which, you know, what can you really say to it? It's the kind of argument you can't, you know, it's an overly simplified argument, I think. But
I don't think that everyone will go vegan in my lifetime, but what I would like to see is that anyone who eats animal products or purchases animal products from the store has experience actually butchering an animal. Because until you do that, you don't really know what you're doing with your wallet.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of kids would be terrified if they had to tear the head off their chicken. You know, I'm sure many kids are taught that at a young age, especially out on farms and that sort of thing. But I don't think they enjoy it, and I agree with you. I think the fundamental human nature is a compassionate one, and I don't think we're intrinsically inclined to kill for food. I think that was a learned behavior necessitated by hostile environments, but definitely not the ideal diet by any means.
I mean, if it was a matter of survival for me, I'd absolutely hunt for my food, but barring that, I'll eat plants every time.
Beautiful.
And even born and raised hunters, one of my best friends, he's hunted every animal in North America pretty much. But he says the first time he killed a deer, he sobbed over its corpse because he just felt the reality of taking that life so clearly. And people like him, I can respect their choice to eat from animals because he knows what it means to take a life. But a lot of people grow up just buying this little package of red stuff in the grocery store, and they don't really know how to connect that to a real sentient being that it came from.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that point. I mean, I've said before, I feel for hunters who are taught at a young age, and it's like a deeply embedded practice in their family. I have a neighbor who, you know, he kills most of the food he eats. Now, that's a lot different than somebody who is buying packaged meats that come from CAFOs. It's still, I agree with you. It's a stretch for me to see how people get entertainment value or actually enjoy the practice of killing an animal as beautiful as a deer is. But nevertheless, you know, it's all it's not black and white. So hopefully, I hope we're as a society moving towards a more compassionate baseline, a more compassionate baseline. Yeah.
I see it as the future. I see it as one of the few ways that we can progress in a real way toward a more peaceful world, a more environmentally sound world. I think that one connection that I have is by living in a way that takes life from other creatures, we make that a normal thing. And I think that makes war and murder more acceptable because it's part of our lives. But if it's not part of our lives to take life from another creature or to hurt other beings, then that's, I think, a greater step to take.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I mean, if it's an accepted ethical principle in society that you can't butcher and be careless with animals, you're going to be much less likely to do it with human beings. It's an excellent point. Can you touched a little bit on environmental negative consequences from an animal food-based diet. Can you kind of go into that a little bit more? Just give us a few of the consequences of an animal-based diet in terms of environmental damage.
Yeah, well, the statistic that has shocked me the most in all my research is that 1/3 of all the land on the planet is dedicated to growing animal products for our consumption. 1/3 of all the land on the planet. And that includes all the crops we grow in order to feed to the animals, in order to take the meat from them. And if we just repurpose those crops to feeding us, we'd have enough to feed 12 billion people. And the Amazon rainforest, 90% of what has been cleared of the Amazon rainforest has been cleared for largely cattle production and other animal products. And the Amazon rainforest, and it's been called the lungs of the earth, it takes all the carbon dioxide and turns it into oxygen. And by cutting that down, I think we limit the lifespan of the human species on this earth. And so many other environmental impacts. I don't know if you've seen pictures of the feces lagoons outside of factory farms.
Yeah.
But the way they do it is they have tens of thousands of animals in these sheds, and they just have grates through which the feces and the vomit and the afterbirth drains. It drains out into these massive shit lakes. And these lakes run off into streams and rivers and contaminate our water. It's the largest contamination source of water in this country. And in order to get rid of it, the strategy they often use is to aerosolize it, just to spray it into the air and have it float away. And the communities around these places hate it, and it constantly smells like shit. And their children get sick, and they have higher rates of asthma and other disease, and they have to close all their windows and their doors so it doesn't go into the house, but it's still, the smell infects their houses. It's crazy the environmental impacts these places have, and it's on lower income families, more predominantly colored families, because of the areas these factory farms operate in. And it's just not seen by the majority of people because, like I said, I live here in Portland. I never see a factory farm here in Portland. That's because they don't do it within sight of the majority of the population.
Yeah, it's horrific. It's horrific.
And as far as efficiency goes, it takes, I think, 20 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of beef. And I think it was 2,500 gallons to produce 1 pound of beef, gallons of water, that is. Cows drink like 15 to 20 gallons of water a day, and that number factors in the amount of water it took to grow the grain that was then fed to the cows.
Right.
And you could save more water by not eating 1 pound of meat that you would normally eat than you would save by not showering for 6 months.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. I mean, for folks that are being careful with their water use and washing their hands, shortening the time they wash their hands and shortening their showers, that's great. But let's highlight this point. What was that? Eschewing meat for 1 day, or just one pound of meat?
1 pound of meat that you would usually eat. Yeah. 6
months of showering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's phenomenal. All right. There's a side to this that I'd like to hear your experience on and what you've learned and how you deal with it. And you've kind of touched on it. It's like family members and how they deal with the diet that you've chosen. So it's like there's a lot of pieces to this. It's like how do you navigate the world? You have this knowledge now. You know what you know, and how do you deliver it when you notice that someone's receptive? How willing are you to push their boundaries a little bit on this? When do you decide that, hey, I just got to drop it, this is not a place to do this? Do you go to the family Thanksgiving celebration while they're all having turkey and eat string beans? How do you do it?
Well, I can't say I'm an expert on converting family members because so far I haven't converted any of my family. Friends I've been a little bit more successful with. No one's committed to a 100% vegan lifestyle yet, but a lot of them have reduced their animal product intake, and some went vegetarian for a few months or so, and then went back to being pescatarian or whatever. But I believe that the information I shared with them, and I do share this information freely, affected their diet on a long-term scale. At least they're thinking about it now, and when they have the option between a vegetarian meal that sounds delicious and a meat meal that sounds delicious, they'll choose the vegetarian meal because of, hopefully, some of the information that I've passed on. And I mean, I receive a lot of criticism, especially starting out, and it's daunting to take on this lifestyle because everyone around you is probably going to be saying, oh no, you're going to die, where are you going to get your protein, there's a horrible decision, how are you going to eat with the family, you're ruining the family.
Right.
And you just have to have faith in yourself, and you just have to be a rock. You just have to tell them this is the way it's going to be now, if this is a decision you want to make, and eventually they'll accept it. Not to say they'll stop poking fun at you, but it doesn't matter if it's something you truly believe in, and I think it's definitely something I truly believe in, and I try to share that belief with other people.
Beautiful. Have you experienced any frustration at seeing relatives get ill from something like a heart attack or diabetes when you know that they don't have to?
Yeah. Yeah, incredible amount of frustration. Because I love them so much, and I truly believe that if they just listened to me, then they would improve their health, and I would get to spend more time with them, and they'd have a happier lifestyle, filled with less pain and less suffering.
Yeah.
But all I can do is share the information, and when they're ready to accept it, they will, and they might not ever be ready.
Something I've been thinking about lately is, to me, it's pretty obvious. Like, say a book by Esselstyn, he shows directly how eating large quantities of meat, animal products, relates to heart attacks, atherosclerosis, and heart disease is such a big ticket item in the United States. I think it was like 600,000 deaths from heart attacks last year. And so that on its own is a huge incentive to look at this diet. But what I'm interested in is what are the other illnesses that arise from atherosclerosis? So, a heart attack or a stroke, these are very catastrophic events, which are easily observable, easily identified as related to atherosclerosis. But what about all the other organs? Diabetes is one that's well known. But what about, say, some of the mental illnesses, or musculosclerosis, with Dr. Swank addressing that? It seems as though plaque in the brain is probably a major factor in muscular sclerosis. So I guess what I'm asking you is, to what degree do you think atherosclerosis may be behind a lot of these other illnesses that are not necessarily associated with high fat in the diet?
Well, atherosclerosis is the clogging of the blood vessels with plaque and cholesterol, and the ultimate effect of this is often a heart attack, which is when the blood supply to the heart is blocked and the muscles of the heart are not getting enough oxygen to continue operating correctly. And the same thing we see in stroke. Artery leading to the brain is blocked by something that's been broken loose, some plaque that's been broken loose in one of the arteries, and it's gone through your system up to the brain, and it clogged that artery, and then part of your brain is not getting oxygen, and it dies. But long before that, we see other effects of this, because our whole bodies require blood and oxygen in order to run properly. One thing that happens that people hardly ever connect to atherosclerosis is lower back pain, because the little capillaries and arteries that give blood all over the body, but especially to that area because it's especially vulnerable to this, they get blocked. And we don't die from it. We don't have a heart attack and keel over and go to the hospital and get a stent. But a lot of people do live with pain in their lower back, and they don't realize that it's because of their dietary choices and their atherosclerosis. And as far as diabetes goes, a close friend of mine is a diabetes researcher, and he deals with diabetic neuropathy, which is in the extremities, like the hands and the feet. They lose feeling. They can't feel if they step on a pin, and that's because the blood supply to those places is interrupted, and the nerves aren't getting enough oxygen. And all of these things have been shown to improve or completely reverse with a plant-based diet, which is why it's so frustrating to me that this isn't more accepted by the general population and more embraced, and people don't just try it out and experiment.
Yeah, totally. All right, Noah, if you will, how are you on time?
I got time.
All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hang up, and we'll do a part 2.
Okay.
And we'll do a little bit more on veganism, and then I'd also like to get into some of your work on corn. I want to hear what that's all about. So for the viewer, Noah does some videos on the negative aspects of corn in the society. So I'm eager to hear about that. So I'll call you right back, okay?
Gotcha.